It's so interesting how almost every time that I'm practicing yoga, I find myself thinking about the parallels of the healing journey. And today in my practice, I had a particular type of thought that I thought I would share with you. Welcome, I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. If you're new, make sure to subscribe and click the bell for notifications. So it is really kind of interesting that no matter what my yoga practice might look like on a particular day, there's something that reminds me of a parallel in this healing process. And today the practice was a lot of hip opening. That was the focus of the program. And I have had issues with tightness in my hips most of my life since I was a pretty young child. And in reality, if you're watching this video, there's a good chance that that might be a little bit of an issue for you too. It's actually quite common for people that have experienced childhood trauma. So when I think back to when I first started doing yoga, which was, I don't know when I first started it, 20 years ago or something, I don't remember exactly what I could and could not do, but I know that I couldn't do a lot. I know that I wanted to do it. I liked the idea of it, but my body just wasn't really allowing me to do a lot. And at that time, I was comparing myself a lot more than I do now. I was judging myself a lot more than I do now. And it was really challenging. And I'm sure that early on, that probably had a fairly significant impact on me sticking with it. Why I would probably do it a few times and then back off, and then maybe decide to do it again later and then back off. That was kind of a cycle that I went through for quite a while. But over the last 10 years or so, I have been, well, actually at this point, about 13 years or so, I've been more involved in yoga. I've been more intentional about it. I've learned more about really the healing and the power of yoga. And so my practice has been a little bit more regular, mostly, not always. But notice I keep saying practice, my yoga practice or the practice of yoga. Well, there's a reason for that, and it's not just the way that I refer to it. That's the way that yoga is referred to. It is a yoga practice. And why is that? Well, at least in part, I mean, I don't know all the historical details about it, but I know that a large part of it is because it is something that you continue to come back to, and you continue to deepen your practice. And as you deepen your practice, there are shifts that happen. There are shifts that happen in your mind, in your body, in your breath, and in your connection to yourself. Just by the nature of continuing to show up in practice and being present in your practice. All those things kind of organically happen when you continue to practice. And the thing about a yoga practice is that, just like with most practices, right, when you start, often you've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to try to understand, and depending on what the practice is, there's a lot of practice that you need to do before you're able to do certain things, right? And so the practice of yoga, it starts by just learning some mechanical types of things. And then it's about deepening. It's about learning to allow yourself to be in a pose that might be a little bit challenging and still connect to your breath. Make sure that you're not holding your breath in those really challenging moments, whether it's challenging in mind or body. Because when you can find presence, when you can connect to your breath in those challenging moments, you relax into it a little bit more. And as you relax into it a little bit more, your muscles, your joints relax a little bit more. And so just like with any sort of flexibility, the more that you are able to practice, the more you're able to release into it, the more mobility and flexibility you gain. Well, this healing journey is much like that. When you first start, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot that doesn't look perfect, right? There's a lot that you might know, like, okay, I know what this pose is, or I know what it's supposed to look like, but yet, whether it's your mind keeping you from doing it or your body keeping you from doing it, something doesn't allow you to do that. And whether you've had an injury or maybe you're just not very flexible, maybe you've got a lot of joint or muscle stiffness, when you're first doing it, there's a lot that you're not able to do. There's a lot of sticking points. But the more you practice, the easier it becomes. The more loose your muscles and joints become, your muscles elongate and allow you to have more flexibility. Well, our mind and even our body does kind of the same thing when we're on this healing journey. Our mind, in terms of openness, in terms of the ability to think about things a little bit differently, to bring into our awareness different things than we normally do. And in our body, the practice is about learning to be safe, learning to be able to take those deep breaths when we are feeling afraid, when we're feeling into that fight or flight place, or even freeze, but particularly the fight or flight. Whether it's yoga or whether it's healing, so much of it really is about presence, awareness, and a leaning in to a little bit of the discomfort, right? One of the things that we hear all the time with yoga is it's not supposed to be painful, but it might feel challenging, or it might feel like a stretch. And ideally, that might feel uncomfortable, but not painful, right? But if you can lean into the discomfort, then you grow from there, right? Your joints release a little bit more, your muscles elongate a little bit more if you can lean in. But if you pull back immediately, if you constrict and stiffen and tell yourself, I can't do this. What am I thinking? I'll never be able to do this. Well, you're going to not do it. And then you never get the practice of allowing yourself to experience what a forward fold with your hands on the ground feels like, or a pigeon pose where you're able to really have your hips flat on the floor. And I have not gotten there yet. I've been practicing a long time, but my hips are so tight. It has been so many decades that I'm still working to get kind of a flat pigeon pose. And the healing journey is much like that. We have to be able to feel safe enough in our bodies, safe enough in our surroundings, to lean in to the discomfort, to the challenge, knowing that we're okay without judgment, because as soon as we judge, we constrict and pull back. But if we can lean into whatever that practice is that we're doing, whether it's a practice of being vulnerable or trying something new, even just on our own, the practice of identifying or connecting with your feelings, these are all practices that are likely going to feel uncomfortable or challenging in some way. But if we can lean into it and stick with it, over time it gets better. It becomes easier. Our mind and our body relax into those practices a little bit easier. And just like with yoga, there are some days that you are able to hit all those poses and look like you should be on a thing that shows all the yoga poses. I am certainly not there. And then other days you feel like you can't even get into a full forward fold. And I have been there. And even if you think about the difference in your body, if you're thinking about a yoga practice or any sort of physical practice, I suppose, but like if you try to do yoga first thing in the morning, which I often do at least just a little bit first thing in the morning, when I first do my forward fold, there are times that my hands can get to my knees, and that's about it. But if I stick with yoga, whether it's the same sequence or even move on to something different, maybe into a down dog or something like that, and then I come back into a forward fold, oftentimes the second time I do my forward fold, my hands are lower, sometimes even actually touching the ground, because I didn't give up. If I had tried to do a forward fold and my hands couldn't get past my knees and I thought, oh my God, this is just not working for me today, and stopped, it would not work for me today. And I would likely be not feeling great about the fact that it didn't work. I might actually feel kind of stiff throughout the day, kind of sore. But just by sticking with it, without judgment, doing something maybe a little bit different, still kind of in relation to it, but maybe moving a little bit differently, the next time around, I get a little bit deeper. And then by the third or fourth time, I'm able to touch the ground. Some days, my hands are able to be flat on the ground. Other days, not so much. And that's the practice of yoga. No matter how long you've been doing it, no matter how good you are at it, and I put that in quotes because what does it really mean to be good at it? I think being good at it means that you just continue to show up. And I think thinking about our expectations is a big part of this. And thinking of it as a practice allows us to really lean into the idea, whether it's yoga or healing or really anything. It allows us to lean into the idea that there is no expectation of perfection. It is a practice. There are some days in yoga that my balance is right on, like great. Generally, my balance is pretty good. So most balancing poses, I don't have any issues with. Other days, I can't even do a forward fold and kick my leg back without holding onto the ground to make sure that I'm balanced. And I don't know what the difference is. I don't know why on some days I can and some days I can't. But that is the practice. And sometimes being able to tune in to your body, just like with this healing practice, right? When we're able to tune in and notice what's happening in our body and sometimes in our mind, because sometimes, whether it's balance or something else, part of the reason that we can't do what it is that we're trying to do is because our mind is so active and it's kind of all over the place that we can't be focused in what is here and now. So giving ourselves the space to not be perfect, to be present instead, allows us to continue to move forward in that practice. So there are days on this healing journey that, for any number of reasons, you might start your day off and feel kind of optimistic about your day. Maybe there's things that you're looking forward to. And that makes it easier to practice some of the things, like maybe journaling, or it feels a little bit more easy to be vulnerable. Maybe you are more willing to try something a little bit differently. Maybe some of the practices to help you on this healing journey come a little bit more naturally. Other days, maybe you wake up or maybe halfway through your day, there's something that doesn't feel so good. Something that reminds you of something that still need some healing, and you find that those things that you've been practicing pretty well, it's like they've escaped, and you have no real recollection that these are things that you could be doing to help you feel better. But then on another day, it's a little bit easier again. Thinking about this healing journey as a practice, and this could be true for anything really that you're learning. And if you think about a baby, a toddler learning to walk, it's a practice, right? And some days it seems like it's just progression, progression, progression. And some days they get up and they fall down, they get up and they fall down. And there's days when they're really not able to take more than just a couple of wobbly steps. But that doesn't mean that they're doing it wrong. It doesn't mean that they'll never be able to walk or run. It means that it's part of the process. That practice is about getting up and doing it again. And some days when you get up and do it again, you progress significantly. Some days you practice and you're just getting through the motions. But that is practice, just like with yoga. Even if you can't get all the way in that forward fold, you're still practicing yoga. You still moved your body. You still honored yourself. And all of those pieces are important, whether you're learning yoga or doing yoga or on this healing journey. So I hope that this just really helps you think about the reality of that. And in particular, what made me think about the parallel there is about the hip opening stuff, because I still, after this amount of time, cannot do a pigeon pose as it would look on a yoga teacher training type of thing. I just can't. And there was a time that I would judge myself for that I would think that I shouldn't be doing yoga and that yoga wasn't for me. But it's not about perfection, because for me, whether my hip is hiked up so high that I need 2 yoga blocks or 1 yoga block, or maybe I'm trying it without a yoga block, which I often try to do, it's not about how far you go. It's about getting to the place that you can, being okay with the discomfort, and learning to breathe fully and deeply in those places where you are stretched physically and emotionally. And from there, in those challenge points, that's where the growth happens. So in that example of pigeon pose, when I am there and I am not where I would be if I were able to do it on a yoga teacher training poster, by allowing myself to be in the space that I can be and breathing through it without judgment, there's release that happens in the muscles and the ligaments and the fascia and the joint. There's release that happens. And the more I can practice that, the more that happens. And the same is true whether we are thinking about feeling something that is hard to feel, grief, feeling vulnerable, working through shame. There are so many similarities. And just like people that have been practicing yoga for decades, who look like the people on a yoga teacher training poster, it's still a practice for them. And there are days that they can do things with such ease and grace, and other days when they don't look like that yoga teacher training poster. because it is an ongoing practice, just as emotional healing is. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What came up for you as you listened? Can you relate to this at all? Share in the comments. If you found this helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up so other people can find it too. And of course, if you haven't yet subscribed, make sure to do so and click the bell for notifications. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.